Okay, this particular review is I'm going to review a book, but I'm also going to give some commentary on that I believe is fairly important commentary on a lot of the things happening right now in the Middle East. But this is Redating the New Testament by John A.T. Robinson. And this book was originally written printed in 1976. And I'm always curious, it's kind of funny when I get order books like this off Amazon that had been pulled from circulation at a library, because that, of course, it's almost like somebody doesn't want that around anymore. And I realize there's all kinds of reasons that books get pulled out of libraries, but alas. So what this is about is this was a New Testament scholar who was really kind of intrigued by the phenomenon he saw all the way back in the 70s of redating the New Testament, pushing that day back. The original consensus prior to really just the last few decades was that the New Testament writings originated up to, say, like maybe as late as the 60s, like AD 60, 65 or so. And since then, there's been a move to push those writings back all the way back to AD 90. And I found this out because I had just been researching a lot of this on my own, and I was attending a church where one of the elders in the church that was big in real estate, but not necessarily big on theology, but because he had a lot of money, he was considered kind of a theological heavyweight, and he was really leaning hard into this whole idea that this was all written in AD 90 and why that was so important. And I found that really peculiar because I had just been doing a lot of research on that myself, and a lot of the writing that says that it's that the New Testament was written in AD 90 really comes down to kind of a trust me bro kind of approach. Whereas the people that were saying it was from the 60s, that makes a lot more sense. So that's what this author is doing, is going through and compiling a lot of evidence within the New Testament and without about how this would line up more accurately to sometime around the 60s. And in this, he's writing this to combat that idea of late dating the New Testament, of saying that doesn't make any sense to push that date out, that really doesn't fit the historical information that we have to compare this to. And he kind of wrings his hands a little bit about, like, why would anybody do this? Which I agree. But I don't know if the good author is still alive, but if he's alive, he probably now knows why this is done. And here's why. And this is why I think this is so important. Someone had a comment recently on some of the stuff I did about the Armageddon script. And this is why I think this is so important about pushing that date out. So let's say someone predicts something like Hurricane Katrina, and they write about that in, say, 2000, the year of 2000, you have a prophet in New Orleans writing about this cataclysmic event that's going to hit New Orleans and is going to cause massive death and destruction and displacement of the local population, okay? If somebody wrote that in the year 2000, when 2005 rolls around and you have Hurricane Katrina, most people who had seen this writer's work would immediately recognize that as the event foretold by this particular writer. They would be like, holy cow, writer X or prophet whoever said this was going to happen, and bam, it happened. And this very obviously is describing the events of the levees breaking and the streets flooding and all this stuff. And holy cow, homeboy predicted it all the way back in 2000. Now, let's say we have a new group of scholars come in and say, oh, no, I think this was actually written sometime around 2006. What you would have is now you're saying, well, obviously this can't be describing Hurricane Katrina because it was written a year later. So obviously he's referring to something out into the future. So whatever he's referring to is definitely a future event that we should be preparing for, that we should be steel ourselves for this moment where this is going to happen. And what that would then allow you to do is co-opt that message and say, no, that message didn't apply to this event that already happened. And obviously it didn't because it's written after the fact. So ignore that history that does fit it and focus on what I'm going to tell you, that this is actually about this future event that's going to happen in New Orleans, and therefore pay attention to me as I lead you down this way. So what we have in the Middle East is a very similar situation. The writings of Josephus, and I'll link to that at the end of this video, very clearly show that a lot of the apocalyptic writings of the early church were fulfilled in the destruction of the temple and the wider destruction of Jerusalem, and of course the displacement of those therein. This was a major event, and I was surprised to read the works of Josephus as an adult to find out, I read it in my 40s, and to realize that a major event had been kept from me as a young Christian. And again, that had been shifted over to send my attention out farther into the future, rather than to analyze this and be like, holy cow, it happened. Like, there's major stuff that was predicted and it happened, and it's very easy to show that it happened. There's an archaeological record that it happened. So I'm going to try to keep this fairly concise, because this is a lot. But so basically you have the early church writers, like John writing in the book of Revelation, and the Olivet Discourse and everything, talking about where Jesus points to the Temple Mount and says, this is all going to be torn down, and there's not going to be one stone left on another. By pushing that out, you're saying that whole destruction that happened in 70 AD, where the temple was literally destroyed, literally like the gold and silver melted down into the bricks, where people were ripping those up, and Roman soldiers were disemboweling people who were trying to flee the scene to find if they had swallowed gold or not. I mean, it was an insanely barbaric scene. And all of that fits what Jesus said, hey, guys, this is going to go down, and here's what it's going to look like. And when you see this happening, he doesn't say you're going to be raptured up into the sky. He goes, run for the mountains. Don't even go back inside for your coat. Go hit the bricks and get out of town. Which again fits exactly with what we later see written by the historian Josephus about what happened in Jerusalem. So again, by scooting that over and saying, no, that doesn't really count. And again, this is where I got crossways with this particular elder at this church, was the argument I was told was, yes, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, but that really wasn't that big of a deal. Now, that does not fit with the historical, what we know with archaeology and the historical record and early church writings, and everything disagrees with that. Again, think of Hurricane Katrina on a, but magnified by, 10 or 20. It was a hugely destructive event, mass murder on an incredible scale. And the idea that this is something that the original church writers just kind of left out just because they just didn't feel like writing about it is insane. So, but the reason you want to do that, the reason you would scoot those dates over, is because if by doing that, again, go back to my Hurricane Katrina analogy, if you say, well, no, this was actually written after Hurricane Katrina, so it's obviously prophesying about a future event. So the same thing goes here. If you say, well, the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, yeah, it's just kind of a little thing. Nobody really cared about that. Kind of a minor occurrence. So obviously, when Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple, when John is talking about the destruction, or all the crazy stuff that's going to go down in Jerusalem, he must be talking about a future event. It's got to be way down the road, which of course also makes Christians look like idiots, because now it's like, oh no, it's going to happen someday. It's going to happen someday. But what that then requires is, now we say, well, in order for these prophecies to be fulfilled, a temple has to be rebuilt just so it can be destroyed again. Sacrifices have to start just so they can stop again. And you see the problem with that, of you have to then fire all this stuff back up just so you can shut it down so your prophecy will fit later on. And therein lies the rub is, again, if you want to control people with these prophecies, then if people start to realize that they may have already been fulfilled in a specific event you can point to and demonstrate in history, then that presents a problem. So the best way to do that is say, no, that didn't count. That was a totally different thing. This is going to be the real event. So pay attention to us as we point you towards the thing. And again, I'm seeing all the time now on social media and YouTube videos are popping up explaining how what we're seeing right now. I even saw a YouTube channel for Anonymous Official that's kind of allegedly like this counterculture anonymous site that is really pushing that the apocalyptic angle of what's happening and it's like, oh, it purports to be secular, but it's taking this, holy cow, guys, this is prophecy unfolding right now in Jerusalem. So watch out for that and be on guard for that. I think even if you have no interest whatsoever in Christian writings or anything like that, the fascinating thing here is someone is using those writings in an effort to manipulate the bulk of the population. I even had someone the other day citing this that is not even slightly into the church scene or anything else, but they were citing some of this saying this is proof that this is about to go down because it fits with prophecy, which is all the more reason to be aware of actual prophecy, actual timelines of things like the destruction of Jerusalem. So anyway, I've gone on enough, but my main point here is if you study the writings of the New Testament and you read the account of Josephus of the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, then you start to see where someone is deliberately downplaying that actual historical event to manipulate you into thinking that that is a future event you should be preparing for. And I'm not saying people shouldn't be prepared for terrible things happening and people shouldn't be careful about how they live their lives and that sort of thing. Not at all. My point here is to watch out for these things being manipulated to turn you against certain people or make you allied with certain people you would otherwise never be allied with. So anyway, I hope that makes sense, and I look forward to the exciting comment section I'm sure will unfold.